Have you ever met a Christian and all they talk about is God? All they talk about is heaven. All they talk about is the Bible. And as you're with them, you're like, am I even saved? Am I doing life wrong if I'm not always talking about God, always quoting scriptures? And here's what I realized. We're not supposed to be so heavenly minded that we are no earthly good, meaning that we love God and God wants us to make disciples and all the things, but we still live here. Welcome back to another episode of the You, Me, and Jesus podcast. And so today we're talking about not being so heavenly minded that we are no earthly good. And I know we may ruffle a few feathers with that, but let's just have a little conversation about that. But first things first, I just want to say thank you so much for watching us on YouTube. And if you enjoy the YouTube channel, make sure you hit like and subscribe to this video and this channel. That way you're always notified every single time we have a new video. And if you're listening on the podcast, thanks so much for listening. You, Me, and Jesus everywhere. If you enjoy the podcast, be sure to share it with a friend. And if you haven't already done so, please give us a 5-star review and then tell us what you think about the show. That way I can read them because I read all the comments, I read all the reviews because it really encourages my faith. So today we're having this episode and we are talking about how it's important to not be so heavenly minded that we are no earthly good, right? And so what does that mean to me? So I started the episode off with asking the question of, have you ever encountered a person who all they talk about is God? All they talk about is heaven. And they never talk about food or basketball or jewelry or nothing. It's just every single thing they talk about is getting to heaven, getting to heaven, getting to heaven. You know, sometimes it makes you feel like you're not saved. It makes you feel like you're not doing enough. And it feels a little awkward. It's hard to have a conversation with a person who can only talk about one thing. But not only that, if you're somebody and you're not a Christian or you're not whatever place that a person is in with their Christianity, and you encounter this person who can't have a conversation out of heaven, a conversation out of the Bible, then you can't relate to them. And you definitely don't want, you don't want to continue talking to them. You definitely don't want to come to their church. You definitely don't want to be discipled by them because you're like, if I'm supposed to be like you, then I don't want that because it feels a little weird, right? I know you have experienced that type of person, right? It may not even be Christianity. It may be politics. It may be the Cold War or whatever. And all they can talk about is that one thing. And you're just like, okay, so yeah. And so when I encounter people like that, I don't always give my opinion because, I give my opinion if somebody asks for it, right? Or if they're just continuing on and on and on and on and on, then I'm like, hey, you're doing too much or whatever. I find a way to articulate what I'm thinking to them. When I think about people like that, people that don't really know how to navigate that, I feel like it's a couple things. One, sometimes a person is a brand new Christian. They were all the way over here in what it is they were in and what they were doing. And then when they gave that up, they gave it up for God, Jesus, the Bible. And in a sense, that's all they have. That's all they know because that's all they've been doing since giving up all of that stuff over there. Because there's this part of them that's like, I can't do anything of what I used to do, or it's going to bring me all the way back over here. I get it. You know what I mean? Because when you've been quote unquote lost and you are found, you're like, I just want to stay in this safe place. I get it. And so I can see it for a new Christian, but someone who is not brand new to Jesus and you've been around for a while, you got to learn how not to be like that. I really don't think that when Jesus was sitting with the tax collectors, when Jesus was sitting when he was the woman at the well, when he was with the woman who was about to get stoned, I really don't think that he was quoting things, right? If we read the scriptures, he was not like that. He acted like a human and he made people feel normal. He drew people to him and then drew them to God, you know what I mean? But he wasn't this weirdo. I know it sounds really mean. I like to try to help people to understand that concept of you have to think about the person that you're talking to. What experience are they having? Now, I know some people say, well, I'm not going to be like them because I'm with Jesus and whatever. I'm not saying go be like them. I'm not saying go do things that you should not do or have conversations around things that you don't want to have conversations around. What I am saying is that one of the greatest things we can do is love people. And then the next thing is disciple them. But you can't love a person if you don't get to know a person. If you don't spend time with the person, you don't like start like enjoying some of the things that they enjoy, not bad things, but just normal things, right? You can't learn to appreciate a person or be with a person if you are weird. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like I've got friends who love reality TV. I don't really watch like a lot of like Real Housewives and stuff like that. I don't really watch stuff like that, but I did watch like Love is Blind. I did watch like, I think back in the day, one of the Married at First Sights. And like, there's a friend of mine who loves that type of stuff. And I don't talk like some of the things that are on the show or act like that or whatever, but it's funny sometimes when I'm watching it and have a friend of mine who I just reach out to and we're able to like chat about it. But this also is the same friend to where if something is going down and she needs prayer, I'm the one that she comes to. There's other friends that have really got into what they call biohacking, like learning all the ins and outs of their bodies and organs and all this stuff that helps with health and wellness and all this stuff. I don't really understand a lot of the stuff, but I do understand some of it, right? And it has been very beneficial for me to learn it. And when I'm having conversation with this friend or with this friend group, I'm able to have, we can have full conversations. You know what I mean? It's like I was one day in at somebody's house and they were talking for like an hour and a half about all this stuff I did not understand. I just sat there, just listening and just listening and listening. And they said, Keenya, do you understand any of this? And I'm like, no, I understand none of it, but it's okay because I'm learning. Listen to y'all. And then somebody changed the subject to something else. And I was 100% in that. And I was able to kind of walk this girl through some anxiety she was experiencing and all this stuff or whatever. And when I finished talking, they were like, how did you do that? And I'm like, how did I do what? I'm like, how did you do what you just did? I'm like, oh, so while y'all were biohacking people, I'm this person. And they're like, oh, and then they spent the next like time just asking me questions. Then they were like, well, what is your relationship with God? Like, how do you hear God? And then it became this whole long conversation about me and my relationship with God, my experiences with God and all that, because I was able to just be normal. We don't have to agree with people. We don't have to be in all the things that they're in, doing all the things that they're doing, but we can't be so weird. We can't be so focused on heaven and getting to heaven that we're actually not enjoying the life that God gave us. God gave me these amazing little cats, and if I was so focused on heaven, I would spend all of my days just praying and praying and praying in my house and not enjoying the cute little cats that I have, not really enjoying learning fashion and makeup, not really enjoying living in beautiful paradise, San Diego, California, if I was so focused on heaven. So this is a very short episode. And I wanted to like bring this to you because I know that we love Jesus, but Jesus wants us to love people, right? And lead people to him. But you can't love people if you don't get to know people. You don't love your spouse, your kids, or whatever without getting to know them. You don't force them into whatever. That's not love. That's control, right? But you do spend time with them. You let people spend time with you so they can get to know you and love you. And so you got to go and spend time with other people. Okay. I hope you enjoyed this short episode. I hope you weren't offended by it. If you were, everything's fine. Otherwise, if you wouldn't mind, please share this episode with somebody. I think it'll be very beneficial to them. I think that they will be super blessed by it. So if you love the You, Me, and Jesus podcast, make sure you go to all the podcast players so you can listen to the podcast. We're on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play.